Welcome back to my channel. I'm Brian Kafiki, and this is the video series Master Databricks and Open Source Apache Spark. We're on to Lesson 17, Structured Query Language, and we're going to be talking about saving query results to tables on Apache Spark. Now, one of the things I want to really call your attention to is when you see the logo below the title, it tells you what I'll be talking about because I'm bouncing back and forth between using Databricks notebooks and using Zeppelin Notebooks on Open Source Spark. So we are doing Zeppelin Notebooks in this video. Where are we heading? I'm going to give you a quick slide just trying to emphasize why SQL is so important on Spark. And then we're going to jump right into our riveting demo. And if you want to really jump up to speed quickly with Databricks, I recommend you get my book, Master Azure Databricks, which is available on Amazon, and I will put a link in the description so you can get to it easily. So the reason SQL is so important is that we have this process here, which is called creating an execution plan. And this is actually something, if any of you've ever worked with a relational database, you know that's what they do. And that's where the Spark, aka Databricks developers, got the idea. So the SQL comes in here and it says, this is what I want to do. And then it gets put through this analysis of creating what's called a logical plan, then physical plans, and then there's an evaluation saying, what's the best way for me to get to the end result? That final plan is optimized. In other words, Spark is finding the most efficient way to satisfy your query. Now, in the end, it has to go back to using resilient distributed data sets because that's the currency of Spark. That's what it's actually got to work with under the covers. But you don't need to use RDDs. In fact, it's far more efficient and performant for you to rely on SQL and data frames instead. So we have a notebook that I will put a link in the description. Also, it's available on GitHub, AW SQL EDA Spark 1. Go for it. It's great. You can go through and use this. My disclaimer to it, of course, is always vet it, check it, make sure it meets your standards, your production environment. It's your responsibility how you use the code. And I did want to point out that if you're like me and you're deleting your cluster when you're done so you don't have to pay for it, then you're going to have to reload the data and recreate the tables so that you can run this notebook. I will put a link also in the description that will get you to video 10, which will show you how to create these tables. One of the things that I've had to do when I go from doing my Databricks demo to doing the open source Spark demos in which they are written in Zeppelin notebooks is I've been cutting and pasting the code between them. I have not found a good utility that will let me move or convert a Zeppelin notebook to Databricks or a Databricks notebook to Zeppelin. So if you know one out there, paste it, I'll take it, I'll be glad to get it. Right now I'm copying, and one of the things I've noticed if you need to do this is remove all the semicolons in your code. The SQL statements on Databricks rely on the semicolon to tell it when a statement is ended and when the next one begins. Now that's important because Databricks notebooks can run multiple SQL statements in a single cell. Zeppelin notebooks cannot, at least the ones I'm running in HD Insight. So you're going to need to remove those semicolons because not only does it not support multiple statements, it does not like the semicolon in those statements. All right, so just be aware of that. That's my biggest takeaway that I've gotten with Zeppelin notebooks. So we're going to talk about saving query results to tables. Now the idea of doing this is that by saving query results to tables, it can save us a lot of time. Maybe we have to do a lot of joins and we're doing a lot of filtering and it takes a while to get to this pristine output that we'd like to do more queries on. We want to do more analysis. It could even be a series of queries that get us kind of like an ETL where we finally get good tables we want to work with. So saving the data to tables is a good idea when you're working with Spark if you want to come back and work with the data again. We're going to have to change the database context to AW project because that's the database we created earlier when we created our tables. So we're going to go, and this simplifies things because by creating a separate database, we can have different subject areas that we want to work in, and the same tables can be the same names as long as they're separated into different databases. So we're going to be running use AW project. Now one of the things I want to do is the AdventureWorks data has one serious deficiency, which is they snowflaked the data when it came to the product table. To get product information, aka the product name, the product subcategory, and the product category, you have to join 3 different tables. That's not a pleasant thing, and honestly, it's a really bad design. Mind you, this is in their data warehouse design. So that's called snowflaking, and despite the popular product, it's a really bad practice, and it's horrible in this particular case. It's also kind of a pain that we have something called English product category name and English product subcategory name, and that's because several languages are supported by separate column names with the prefix of English, French, Spanish, etc. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to simplify this. What do we want to do is pull together the data so that we can get the product keys we need, the product key, product subcategory key, and category key, and we're going to get the product category name, and we'll just rename it category. We want to get the English product subcategory name, and we want to call that, you can do Control Z, by the way, to reverse mistakes like that. Control Z is an undo. We're going to call the product category name just subcategory. Model name, we're just going to call model. Now, we're going to do it from dim product. We're going to bring in dim product subcategory. We're going to join on that key. Then we're going to get to the product category, join, and we're going to filter out where the product status is current or where its P status equal null. So in other words, when the P status is current, we will take it, or when the P status is equal to null. And the P just means it's tying it back to the original table, P, dim product. So it's just filtering so that we're getting products that are current. That's kind of the idea here. Now, the reason it says null instead of actually having a null value is that that's how the CSV file carried the values when I extracted it. So it's a physical value text of null. And I ran this query already, so I won't run it again here, but you can see here's our product categories, etc. That's about it. So it just gives you a nice simplified version, a product table that we can use. So what we want to do now is create a table, T product info. That's going to be the query we saw above, but we're going to take that and persist it as a permanent table. Before we do that, let's make sure it doesn't exist. In this case, I'm going to say drop the table if it exists. Now the nice thing about the if exists clause is it won't give me an error if it doesn't exist. Now we're going to run a query. This query is the same query we saw before. It's creating just a nice simple table that has our product information, so we don't have to keep joining all these things. And we're going to call it T product info. Just to see that this worked, and I did run this already, so you can see I've already run this code. I'll rerun it just to prove it really works. But you can see here, I'm just going to select distinct model, subcategory, and category, right? I'm going to get a count of how many products are there by this T product info. I'm going to group by model, subcategory, and category, order by the number of products in descending order. So the most products will be at the top. And you can see in my output, you've got bikes and you've got num products, etc. So mountain bike 200, the mountain dash 200 is the top, has the most products. And then the next one is the LL mountain frame and how many things in there. And that's a component category. So you can see we have the model, subcategory, category, and number of products. Now what I want to do is do a describe T product info. If you're like me and you forget what's in this table, the describe is really handy to just tell you what the types are of data, but also what the column names are. The other thing you can do is maybe you want to create a table very much like a table that exists. You can do show create table, and in this case we'll use our table we just created. I'm going to run that, and you can see the full description here all spelled out. Initially, the default setting on the Zeppelin Notebook was truncating this column because it's a string that was exceeding like 20 characters or something, and the default setting was to truncate it. I'm going to show you how to change the interpreter settings so that it won't. If you go to the upper right corner where it says anonymous, again, this is on HD Insight. I don't know if everything will look the same way you are. You want to go to your interpreter, and then you have to scroll down until you come to the Livy, I think it's the Livy interpreter, and here it is, Livy 2, and you're going to have to edit. You see all these settings, but these are all fixed. What you want to do is click Edit, and then now you can make changes to the configuration. Now a strange thing about this particular configuration is the field truncate. You'll notice that some of these say true, false, right? Like this is false, etc. Then other ones, they put a checkbox. I don't get it. It seems very strange to me that some would be one way, some another. In this case, if you notice my create table statement printed just great. And that's because I unchecked it. You'll probably see that it's set like this. So you're going to want to uncheck it, and then you're going to scroll to the end and say save. And then it's going to say, do you want to update this interpreter and restart with the new settings. Now bear in mind that if you do that, it's going to restart the kernel, and it means you're starting your notebook from the beginning. It won't know where you are. It loses the memory, the objects, etc. So say OK, and then you're just going to have to rerun your notebook. That's about it though. Then you see the create table. So if you do see that problem and you're getting it truncated, remember this part of it. So wrapping up, we talked about the importance of SQL. The number one thing to remember about SQL that I really try to drive home with people is that SQL is your best friend on Spark. My favorite language on Spark is between Python and SQL. And in fact, those are the two most popular languages on Spark. So I'm in good company. But given a choice, I would tell people use SQL whenever you can, even over Python, because it's going to perform the best in most cases. So it's a good go-to choice. When you're working with SQL databases, which is really how you can think of Spark SQL, you're going to want to create intermediate query results. It could take you a long time to extract, to maybe summarize, to maybe do sampling or something. And rather than keep running those same queries, why not just save them to tables that you can come back to and reuse whenever you want? And maybe even set up a notebook that periodically refreshes the data. Like maybe you've got new CSV files and things coming in, so you can refresh that and regenerate your analysis tables. And that'll save you a lot of time. This is a very common practice in the relational database world for decades, so I can't see why it won't apply here as well. I hope you like this. Please like, share, put comments in, let me know. I know this is kind of redundant with the Databricks one, so I'm not sure which thread you're following, but I'm trying to do both so that people can really see what they need and don't get confused between the two. Pick the one that you like best or follow both. It's up to you. Thanks again, and remember, I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together.